It was just after 9:30 p.m. on a Sunday evening at Tina's Burritos factory in Vernon, California, a small industrial city just a few miles from Los Angeles. The factory, known for producing nearly 1 million frozen burritos each day, was humming with activity as employees prepared for the next day's production run. Workers hustled to clean, sanitize, and ready the massive machinery, unaware that the night would take a tragic turn. A 19-year-old sanitation worker, tasked with routine cleaning duties, was assigned to sanitize one of the plant's enormous meat kettles, a towering piece of equipment critical to the factory's daily output. What should have been a standard task quickly turned into a nightmare. Somehow, the young man became trapped inside the kettle. Despite the immediate response from co-workers and emergency personnel, he could not be saved and tragically passed away at the scene. Vernon police and city officials confirmed there were no signs of foul play, labeling it an industrial accident, though an ongoing investigation is underway with Cal OSHA and the district attorney's office to determine exactly how this could have happened. The accident sent shockwaves through the small factory community. Tina's Burritos released a statement expressing profound grief over the loss, emphasizing that the employee was performing routine cleaning tasks when the incident occurred. They highlighted the swift actions of colleagues and emergency responders and offered heartfelt condolences to his family, friends, and co-workers. City officials echoed these sentiments, calling the death heartbreaking and offering support to those affected. Investigators are now working to piece together what went wrong and how a tragedy like this might have been prevented. While accidents are unfortunately not uncommon in facilities that handle heavy machinery and large-scale food production, the death of such a young worker underscores the critical importance of strict safety measures and adherence to proper protocols. Tina's Burritos affirmed its commitment to cooperating fully with authorities and maintaining high safety standards across its facility. Factories like Tina's Burritos are high-pressure, high-demand environments. Employees work long hours handling enormous machines, heavy loads, and potentially hazardous materials, all while ensuring efficiency and speed in production. Despite the best intentions and routine safety procedures, incidents like this show how quickly ordinary work can become fatal when machinery, procedures, or circumstances fail. This tragedy also serves as a sobering reminder of the human cost behind the convenience of modern food production. Millions of people rely on fast packaged foods without ever seeing the complex and sometimes dangerous processes involved in making them. Workers like this young sanitation employee play a vital role in keeping production lines running, often performing repetitive, physically demanding, and high-risk tasks that the public rarely considers. As the community mourns, Tina's Burritos temporarily closed portions of its facility to focus on supporting employees and honoring the life of the young worker. The incident is a stark reminder of why workplace safety cannot be overlooked and how fragile life can be, even during what might seem like routine duties. It's a heartbreaking story, but one that compels us to acknowledge the people behind the products we take for granted and the systems in place to keep them safe. Ultimately, the death at Tina's Burritos is a tragic, sobering reminder that industrial workplaces, while essential to our daily lives, carry inherent risks. These environments demand constant vigilance, thorough training, strict adherence to safety protocols, and above all, respect for every worker's life and well-being. One moment of misfortune is all it takes for tragedy to strike. The Courrières mine disaster of 1906 stands as one of the darkest chapters in Europe's industrial history, a grim reminder of how progress often came at the expense of human lives. On the morning of March 10, 1906, in northern France's Courrières coalfield, over 1,700 miners descended into the depths of the earth, unaware that only about half of them would ever see daylight again. Moments later, a massive explosion, likely caused by coal dust igniting after a minor underground fire, ripped through the mine's tunnels. The blast was so violent it shattered equipment, collapsed galleries, and sent a wave of suffocating gas and debris racing through the shafts like a deadly storm. The explosion instantly killed hundreds, but the true horror unfolded in the hours that followed. The air underground became a toxic mix of smoke and gas, and survivors stumbled blindly through the darkness, gasping for air as they searched for an escape that no longer existed. Above ground, chaos reigned. Families rushed to the mine's entrance, desperate for news of loved ones. The blackened faces of rescuers emerging from the tunnels told them all they needed to know. It was a scene of heartbreak and disbelief, one that would haunt the mining communities of northern France for generations. The death toll reached an estimated 1,099 miners, making it Europe's worst mining disaster. Among the victims were children as young as 10, who had been working alongside their fathers in the dangerous, cramped tunnels. The scale of the tragedy shocked not just France, but the entire continent. In an era when industrial safety was often treated as an afterthought, the Courrières disaster exposed the brutal reality of the working class, the people whose sweat and lives fueled Europe's growing industries. Rescue operations began, but they were painfully slow. The mine company hesitated, fearing further explosions, and delayed sending rescue teams for days. This hesitation sparked outrage. As officials argued, volunteers and fellow miners took matters into their own hands, venturing into the deadly maze to pull out whoever might still be alive. Incredibly, 13 miners were found alive 20 days later, having survived in near darkness by eating horse meat and drinking filthy water. Their survival was hailed as miraculous, but it only highlighted the disastrous mismanagement of the initial rescue efforts. The aftermath was turbulent. Strikes erupted across France, fueled by anger at the government and mine owners who seemed more concerned about profits than human lives. The disaster became a powerful symbol of industrial neglect and a rallying cry for workers' rights. It forced authorities to confront the urgent need for stricter safety regulations, better ventilation systems, and humane working conditions underground. Today, more than a century later, the Courrières mine disaster remains a solemn reminder of the human cost of progress. The site stands as both a memorial and a warning, a tribute to the miners who perished, and a testament to the resilience of those who demanded change in the face of unimaginable loss. Beneath the quiet fields of northern France lie the echoes of that terrible morning in 1906, when the earth itself seemed to swallow a community whole, and the world learned a painful lesson about the price of industrial ambition. The Soma mine disaster of 2014 stands as one of the most devastating industrial tragedies in Turkey's history, a haunting reminder of how neglecting safety can turn a workplace into a graveyard. On May 13, 2014, in the mining town of Soma, Manisa province, what began as a regular day quickly spiraled into catastrophe. During a shift change, when both outgoing and incoming miners were underground, an explosion and subsequent fire tore through the tunnels. Within moments, the darkness filled with smoke, heat, and deadly carbon monoxide. The mine, normally bustling with the sounds of drills and machinery, fell silent as hundreds of workers were trapped deep beneath the earth, fighting for air that had turned toxic. Above ground, confusion turned to horror as news spread that something had gone terribly wrong. Families gathered outside the mine entrance, their faces pale with fear, waiting for updates that grew more heartbreaking by the hour. The rescue operation that followed was intense and Stockholm, 1912. The Olympic Games were alive with excitement, bringing together athletes from around the world who carried the hopes of their nations and the weight of personal ambition. Among them was Francisco Lázaro, a dedicated Portuguese marathon runner whose talent and discipline had earned him a place among Portugal's most promising athletes. Lázaro was determined to perform at his best, but in an era when sports science and athlete safety were still in their infancy, knowledge about the human body under extreme stress was limited. In an attempt to protect himself from sunburn during the marathon, Lázaro applied a layer of wax over his body. At the time, this method was believed to be a protective measure, but what it actually did was prevent his body from sweating properly. sweat is the human body's natural cooling system, and by blocking his pores, the wax made Lazaro vulnerable to overheating. As the race continued under the unrelenting summer sun, the consequences of this decision became tragically clear. He began to show signs of extreme fatigue and distress, yet the intensity of the competition and his personal drive pushed him forward despite the growing danger. Midway through the marathon, Lazaro collapsed. Spectators and fellow athletes were shocked as one of the competitors fell to the ground in distress. He was immediately taken to a nearby medical facility, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. Lazaro suffered severe heat stroke, a condition that occurs when the body's temperature rises uncontrollably and vital organs begin to fail. Despite the care provided, he did not recover and passed away the following day. His death marked the first recorded fatality in the history of the modern Olympic Games. The circumstances surrounding his collapse were unusual, but they highlighted a critical truth about athletics at the time. Athletes were pushing the limits of human endurance without adequate understanding of the risks. The tragedy of Francisco Lazaro was compounded by the fact that his efforts to protect himself had inadvertently caused his demise. The combination of extreme heat, physical exertion, and the blocked cooling mechanism of his body proved fatal. This event shocked the sporting community and brought immediate attention to the importance of athlete safety, hydration, and awareness of heat-related illnesses. Francisco Lazaro's story is remembered today both for its tragic outcome and its significance in the evolution of sports safety. He has become a symbol of dedication and the human desire to excel, but also a reminder of the limits of human vulnerability. His death prompted reflection on the need for proper preparation, medical knowledge, and safety measures for athletes competing in demanding events. Modern marathons now include careful monitoring of participants, access to hydration, and education on avoiding heat stroke, measures that were absent in Lazaro's time. While he never completed the race or achieved Olympic glory, his legacy endures in the lessons learned from his experience. Lazaro is commemorated as a pioneer of Portuguese athletics, a figure whose courage and tragic fate continue to resonate over a century later. His life and death remind us that the pursuit of excellence carries inherent risks, and that understanding the human body and respecting its limits is essential for the safety of all athletes. The marathon claimed him as its first Olympic victim, and through his story, generations of athletes and sports enthusiasts are reminded of the delicate balance between ambition, endurance, and human frailty. Construction and industrial sites are dangerous, but some accidents go beyond what anyone could imagine. Just 9 days into his new job at Caterpillar's foundry in Mapleton, Illinois, 39-year-old father of 3, Stephen Dierks, faced a nightmare no one could prepare for. On June the 2nd, he fell into an 11-foot-deep vat of molten iron and was instantly consumed by the searing heat. Molten iron at the foundry reaches nearly 2,600 joules, hotter than lava, and more than enough to destroy human flesh in an instant. For workers on the floor, a single misstep can be fatal. That day, Stephen's routine task turned into tragedy. He was working as a melt deck operator tasked with collecting a sample of molten iron. After spinning a massive wheel to pour the metal, he leaned over the vat. Somehow, he slipped. Witnesses described the scene as unimaginable. Emergency crews arrived almost immediately, but there was nothing they could do. Half of his body had already been consumed, and Stephen Dierks died on the spot. The incident stunned the plant, but unfortunately, it wasn't entirely unprecedented. Just a year earlier, in 2021, 50-year-old contractor Scott Adams also fell to his death at the same foundry. OSHA's investigation into Stephen's death concluded that if required safety guards or fall protection had been installed, the employee's 9th day on the job might not have been his last. OSHA also noted that workers were routinely exposed to unprotected fall hazards and proposed a fine of $145,000. Stephen's fiancée, Jessica Sutter, has been outspoken about the tragedy. "My children are left without their father. I am left without my fiancé, my partner, my best friend, all because they didn't take better safety precautions," she said. She also claims that Caterpillar offered no support, leaving her struggling to provide for her 2 daughters while dealing with the financial fallout. "As far as Caterpillar, I feel that they are murderers. It's a slaughterhouse. No one should have to lose their life like this, she added. Former and current employees paint a disturbing picture of life at the foundry. Workers report constant exposure to smoke, soot, and extreme heat that can exceed 120 degrees in summer months. Protective clothing offers only minimal defense against molten metal, and fall prevention measures are often inadequate or ignored. One worker explained that even leaning slightly over a melter to collect a sample was extremely dangerous. But employees were expected to do it anyway. The plant is split by the wall, dividing the machining area from the iron melting side, and employs over 800 people operating around the clock. Yet, safety protocols are inconsistent. Co-workers claim that after Stephen's death, Caterpillar only shut down operations for 2 days, reopening while the smell of burned flesh still lingered. In the absence of company support, employees even organized their own fundraiser for Stephen's family, as OSHA fines do not go directly to them. The tragedy at Mapleton is a harrowing reminder of how unforgiving industrial work can be. In environments with molten metal flowing beneath your feet, safety isn't optional. It's a matter of life and death. For Stephen Dierks, a routine task became fatal because protections that should have been in place simply weren't. Families, colleagues, and regulators continue to demand accountability, but the lesson is stark and clear. In these workplaces, one slip, one moment of distraction, and everything can change in an instant. Imagine it is 1942, deep in wartime China, where life above ground is already tense and below ground. It is a whole different world, filled with darkness, dust, and danger. Welcome to the Bengsihu Colliery, a massive coal mine in Liaoning province that was basically a ticking time bomb waiting for a spark. On April 26th, that spark finally came. One moment, miners were doing their usual backbreaking routine, hacking away at coal in the dim light. And the next, the entire underground world roared to life. A massive coal dust and gas explosion tore through the tunnels like a fiery dragon unleashed, turning an ordinary day at work into the deadliest mining disaster in human history. The explosion was so violent that it blasted debris out of the mine entrance, sending smoke and flames into the air. But the real horror was what happened afterward. The mine was under Japanese occupation during World War II, and the operators, fearing the spread of fire, decided to seal the mine shut with hundreds of workers still trapped inside. Imagine hearing the last thuds of rescue attempts fade away as the air turns thick with smoke. The lights go out, and the temperature rises. It is the stuff of nightmares, but for over 1,000 men, it was a cruel reality. When rescuers finally reopened the mine days later, the scene was beyond tragic. A total of 1,549 miners were confirmed dead, most from suffocation and carbon monoxide poisoning rather than the blast itself. Many were found still clutching tools or wearing expressions frozen in terror. The disaster exposed not only the dangers of mining, but also the brutality of the working conditions at that time. Chinese miners were forced to work in inhumane circumstances with long hours, minimal safety measures, and constant pressure to produce more coal for the war effort. Safety checks were practically non-existent. Gas monitoring was ignored. It was all about output, and the cost of that obsession was paid in lives. The Japanese authorities initially tried to cover up the scale of the disaster, reporting far fewer deaths than the reality. But news spread quickly, and the horrifying number, over 1,500 dead, could not stay buried. When the bodies were finally brought out, they were so badly burned and charred that identification was nearly impossible. Mass graves were dug, and the cleanup became more about removing evidence than honoring the dead. For the survivors and families, there were no words, only grief, anger, and silence. In hindsight, the Bengsihu disaster was not just about a gas explosion. It was about neglect, exploitation, and the human cost hidden behind industrial progress. The conditions that caused it were the result of reckless management, poor ventilation systems, and a total disregard for worker safety. Yet, out of this tragedy came a grim wake-up call. In the decades that followed, mining safety began to take center stage, at least in theory. Countries introduced stricter protocols, ventilation standards, and dust control systems to prevent such catastrophes. Unfortunately, history has a nasty habit of repeating itself, and smaller mining disasters have continued to echo Bengtsihu's deadly lesson even into the modern era. Today, the Bengtsihu colliery site stands as a somber reminder of what happens when profit is placed above humanity. No monuments, no grand memorials, only the quiet memory of 1,549 workers who never made it back to daylight. It is a chilling chapter in industrial history, but one that still resonates. So, the next time someone complains about a tough day at work, maybe remember that once upon a time, in a dusty mine in 1942, hundreds of men gave everything just to dig up coal. The least we can do is remember them, not with fear, but with respect, and perhaps a little awe for the price they paid in the dark. The world was just hours away from the grand opening of the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics. Fireworks were ready, cameras were set, and athletes were gearing up for the biggest event of their lives. But amid all that excitement, a single moment on a freezing track in Whistler turned the celebration into heartbreak. Nodar Kumaritashvili, a 21-year-old luger from the small nation of Georgia, was about to make his final practice run before the games began. Young, determined, and proud to represent his country, he had trained for years to earn that Olympic spot. But that February morning would mark not the start of his Olympic dream, but its tragic end. The Whistler Sliding Center was notorious even before the games began. Athletes called it the fastest and most dangerous luge track ever built. Some said it was a marvel of engineering, while others called it a death trap disguised as a sport venue. Riders were clocking speeds of nearly 150 kilometers per hour, faster than anyone had ever gone in Olympic luge history. Even seasoned veterans complained that one mistake could send them flying. Nodar, a newcomer to such high-speed tracks, had already expressed concerns to his family that it was too dangerous. Still, like any true competitor, he decided to face it head-on. He launched himself from the start gate, the sled slicing into the ice like a silver arrow. For the first few seconds, everything looked smooth. He navigated the early turns with precision, leaning into the walls, maintaining balance, adjusting his weight. But as he approached curve 16, the final and most treacherous bend, his sled lost control. Traveling at over 145 kilometers per hour, Nodar's sled hit the wall, blipped, and threw him out violently. In a split second, his body slammed into an unprotected steel support pole. The impact was fatal. It was instant. Just like that, the world lost a young athlete before the games could even begin. When news broke, silence fell over the Olympic Village. The Georgian team was devastated. The opening ceremony that night carried a heavy sadness. Flags flew at half-mast, and his teammates walked in tears, holding a black ribbon in his memory. The Olympics, known for unity and celebration, began under a cloud of grief. The footage of the crash, replayed across news outlets, sparked outrage. How could such a dangerous track be approved for competition? Why were there steel poles so close to the track? And more importantly, why were warnings ignored? In response, officials immediately launched an investigation. They lowered the start positions for the men's event to reduce speed and added higher walls and padding along the curves. While the report later called Nodar's crash a unique and unforeseeable accident, many in the sporting world did not buy it. Athletes and analysts pointed to poor track design, lack of safety barriers, and the dangerous obsession with speed over safety. The Whistler track was supposed to showcase human courage and precision. Instead, it exposed human recklessness in the pursuit of thrill. Even years later, Nodar's name is spoken with a mix of sorrow and respect. He was not a celebrity athlete or a gold medal favorite. He was simply a young man chasing a dream, like thousands before him. His death became a grim reminder that behind the glory of the Olympic flame lies real risk, real danger, and sometimes real loss. The track was modified, the safety protocols improved, and his story etched into Olympic history as a lesson learned too late. The 2010 Games eventually went on to be called the Games of Hearts and Heroes. But for Georgia, and for many who watched that tragedy unfold, one thought lingered. No medal, no record, and no spectacle is ever worth a human life. It It was a typical afternoon at New B, a plastic recycling factory in the St. Laurent borough of Montreal. The machines churned endlessly, crushing and shaping plastic with relentless force. For workers, the rhythm of the rollers was just part of the day. Clock in, keep the line moving, clock out, repeat. But on August 8, 2016, that rhythm was shattered forever. Around 12:15 p.m., a 56-year-old employee spotted a strip of plastic jammed in the rollers. Determined to keep production running, he climbed a 1.2-meter ladder to reach the obstruction. What seemed like a simple, routine task turned catastrophic in seconds. His hand became trapped between the two massive rollers, and before anyone could react, his entire arm, and eventually his torso, was pulled into the unforgiving machinery. The space between the rollers was just 12 centimeters, yet it was enough to trap his body completely. Co-workers scrambled. One pressed the emergency stop button while others tried desperately to free him. Ambulance workers arrived quickly, and the man was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Despite their efforts, his injuries were too severe. He tragically succumbed to the crushing force of the rollers shortly after arriving. The incident shocked employees and highlighted just how dangerous industrial work can be, even during tasks that seem simple. Factories like New B rely on machines that can crush, shred, and mold materials with incredible power. But that same power leaves little room for error. One misstep, one moment of distraction, and a routine day can become a fatal one. NEST, Quebec's Workplace Health and Safety Board, began an investigation to determine the exact circumstances. New B pledged full cooperation, acknowledging the tragedy while emphasizing their commitment to safety. But for those who witnessed the accident, and for the worker's family, the damage had already been done. The event served as a stark reminder that even the most ordinary tasks in industrial workplaces carry life or death stakes. The roller incident is far from unique. Across the world, industrial accidents like this happen every day, from lathes in Russian factories to sawmills in East Texas and molten iron vats in Illinois. Each story shares a common thread: machines with immense power, workers trying to complete their tasks, and a split-second miscalculation that turns fatal. Safety is not just a guideline, it's survival. In factories, even a small misstep, a loose sleeve, or a moment of distraction can have catastrophic consequences. Industrial machines may shape our world, but they do so with no mercy. The New B tragedy reminds us that behind every product, there's a human life at risk, working tirelessly to keep the line moving. Incidents like this have led industries to focus more on safety protocols, training programs, and protective equipment. Workers are now being taught to respect the power of machines, wear proper clothing, and recognize hazards before they become deadly. Emergency stop buttons, regular inspections, and advanced safety features are being emphasized to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Yet, despite all precautions, industrial work will always carry risk. The story of the New B roller incident is a sobering reminder that life can be here one second and gone the next. It calls on all of us to value safety, respect the machines, and never underestimate the power behind the equipment that shapes the modern world. For workers, it's a daily reality. For the rest of us, it's a wake-up call. One wrong move, and a life can be lost in an instant. The Soma mine disaster of 2014 stands as one of the most devastating industrial tragedies in Turkey's history, a haunting reminder of how neglecting safety can turn a workplace into a graveyard. On May 13, 2014, in the mining town of Soma, Manisa province, what began as a regular day quickly spiraled into catastrophe. During a shift change, when both outgoing and incoming miners were underground, an explosion and subsequent fire tore through the tunnels. Within moments, the darkness filled with smoke, heat, and deadly carbon monoxide. The mine, normally bustling with the sounds of drills and machinery, fell silent as hundreds of workers were trapped deep beneath the earth, fighting for air that had turned toxic. Above ground, confusion turned to horror as news spread that something had gone terribly wrong. Families gathered outside the mine entrance, their faces pale with fear, waiting for updates that grew more heartbreaking by the hour. The rescue operation that followed was intense and dangerous, moving like the sea, and within minutes, the pit became a mass grave. Rescue teams rushed in, but all they could find were helmets, sandals, and flashes of the green stones that had caused so much suffering. The tragedy did not come out of nowhere. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The jade mining industry in HORRIFYING is worth billions, but most of its profits never reach the miners themselves. Instead, the area is a chaotic patchwork of unregulated sites, enormous waste heaps, and dangerous working conditions. Companies dig deep, dump the leftover rubble into massive piles, and move on, leaving locals to pick through the remains. Add in the heavy monsoon rains, poor safety measures, and lack of government oversight, and you have a recipe for catastrophe. In fact, landslides in HORRIFYING are so common that locals have a grim saying, "When it rains, the mountains eat men." Sadly, the 2020 landslide proved just how literal that could be. After the disaster, rescue workers pulled out more than 160 bodies, while dozens more remained missing. The Myanmar Fire Service Department posted grim updates on Facebook as photos of the muddy devastation spread across the internet. Families gathered at the site, waiting for news that never came. Officials called it one of the worst mining accidents the country had ever seen. But for the people of HORRIFYING, it was another reminder that their lives were considered expendable in the pursuit of jade, a stone prized in luxury markets across the world. The HORRIFYING disaster was not just about nature's fury. It was about human greed and neglect. Experts later found that the slope had been dangerously unstable long before it collapsed, weakened by reckless dumping and rainwater infiltration. Locals had even warned authorities about the risk, but little was done. The government promised tighter regulations afterward, but with the jade trade being so lucrative and politically entangled, real change has been slow. In the end, the HORRIFYING landslide became a haunting symbol of Myanmar's jade industry, a world where fortune and fatality coexist side by side. Beneath the gleam of every polished green gemstone lies a story of struggle, sacrifice, and sometimes tragedy. Those who died in the 2020 disaster were not just victims of a landslide, they were victims of a system that buried them long before the earth did. The 1960 Rome Olympics were meant to celebrate human excellence, the pinnacle of athletic achievement, and the uniting spirit of global competition. Instead, one tragic event would mark the Games with a somber reminder of the physical limits of even the most elite athletes. Knud Enemark Jensen, a 28-year-old Danish cyclist, was competing in the 100-kilometer team time trial under conditions that were brutally unforgiving. Temperatures in Rome on that day exceeded 40 degrees, creating a heat so oppressive that it pushed the human body into extreme stress. Jensen, like all competitors, was driven by the desire to perform at his absolute best, yet the combination of intense physical exertion, relentless heat, and underlying health risks would prove fatal. Partway through the race, Jensen collapsed, unable to continue. He was rushed to a field hospital, but despite immediate medical attention, he never regained consciousness. His death was officially attributed to heat stroke, dehydration, and physical collapse, but subsequent investigations and revelations would cast a darker shadow over the tragedy, introducing the role of performance-enhancing substances in his untimely death. The controversy surrounding Jensen's death highlights the precarious intersection of ambition, competition, and human vulnerability. Evidence suggests that Jensen and other members of the Danish cycling team were administered Roniacol, a vasodilator intended to enhance blood circulation. Later reports and retrospective analyses implied the presence of stimulants such as amphetamines, although these claims remain debated. Regardless, the incident brought the dangers of pharmacological intervention in sport into sharp relief. It demonstrated that even substances intended to improve performance could have unintended and fatal consequences, particularly under extreme physical stress. Jensen's death was more than a personal tragedy. It became a stark lesson for the international sporting community on the ethical and medical responsibilities owed to athletes. The impact of this event extended far beyond the 1960 Games. In the immediate aftermath, the International Olympic Committee recognized the urgent need for oversight in competitive sports. By 1961, a dedicated medical commission was established to monitor athlete health and investigate drug use. These measures laid the foundation for the introduction of systematic drug testing at the 1968 Winter and Summer Olympics. Jensen's death catalyzed a transformation in how athletes' safety was approached, highlighting that physical preparation and talent alone were not sufficient to protect competitors. It underscored the ethical imperative of balancing the pursuit of excellence with the duty of care, ensuring that no athlete would have to risk life or health to compete at the highest level. Decades later, Jensen's story remains a somber reminder of the risks inherent in competitive sport. It exemplifies the extremes of human ambition, the vulnerability of the body under relentless stress, and the consequences of inadequate medical oversight. The tragedy serves as a historical turning point, emphasizing the importance of safety, regulation, and ethical responsibility in athletics. Jensen's death prompted systemic changes that continue to safeguard athletes, shaping modern anti-doping protocols and medical supervision in elite sport. While the memory of his collapse is painful, it carries a lasting significance. The world of sports learned a vital lesson about the limits of human endurance and the necessity of protecting those who inspire us through their dedication, skill, and courage. Knud Enemark Jensen's legacy is thus twofold. He is remembered both as a talented cyclist whose life ended tragically in pursuit of Olympic excellence, and as a symbol of the reforms that emerged from his death, reforms that protect generations of athletes from similar fates. His story is a sober reflection on the costs of ambition, the ethical responsibilities of sports authorities, and the ongoing commitment to ensuring that the pursuit of glory never comes at the ultimate price. It was a regular afternoon at the Whitworth sawmill in East Texas, the kind of day that should have been ordinary. The air buzzed with the grind of machines, smelled of fresh-cut pine, and radiated the heat of men working hard to keep the mill running. But inside, 4 workers were about to face a catastrophe that no one could have anticipated. Around noon, the men, Charles Richard Dick Whitworth, 33, co-owner of the mill, Reuben Anson Cox Jr., 31, and 2 Mexican nationals, Crescencio Leon and Ascension Farfan, both believed to be in their 30s, were struggling to clear a jammed wood chip machine. Like many mills, the Whitworth sawmill relied on massive steel cables wound around gears to manipulate and free heavy machinery. The men pulled and adjusted the cable, trying desperately to dislodge the blockage. But the cable, stretched taut like a bow, had stored dangerous energy. When it finally snapped, it whipped across the floor with the speed of a bullet and the force of a guillotine. All 4 men were struck immediately. Witnesses described the scene as incomprehensible. 4 bodies standing upright, but critically incomplete, decapitated in an instant. Sawdust, helmets, and the remnants of the men's lives were scattered across the floor. The 5th worker, who had been caught in the path but slightly off to the side, suffered a shattered leg but survived. EMTs arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do for the 4 men who had lost their lives. Sheriff Leon Fowler called it a bad scene, and Justice of the Peace Wanda Brasher confirmed the identities of the victims. The accident, like many workplace tragedies, highlighted a dangerous combination of human error, mechanical risk, and insufficient safety precautions. The Whitworth sawmill accident is a stark reminder of the risks that exist in industrial workplaces. Machines that grind, slice, and churn can be unforgiving, and even small miscalculations can become fatal. The workers at the mill, much like those in foundries, construction sites, and heavy industry across the country, face hazards that demand strict adherence to safety protocols. This story mirrors another tragic incident at Caterpillar's Mapleton, Illinois, foundry, where 39-year-old father of 3, Stephen Dierkes, fell into an 11-foot-deep vat of molten iron on just his 9th day on the job. He was tasked with collecting a sample of molten iron, which reaches temperatures hotter than lava, over 2,600 degrees. After leaning over the vat to retrieve it, Dierke slipped and partially fell in, instantly incinerated. OSHA later found that fall protection and safety guards were lacking and proposed a fine of $145,027. His fiancée, Jessica Sutter, condemned the company, saying her children were left fatherless because of inadequate safety measures. Both the sawmill and foundry tragedies reveal the deadly consequences when workers are exposed to extreme hazards without proper protections. At Whitworth Sawmill, a stretched cable acted with lethal speed. At Caterpillar, molten iron consumed a man in seconds. In each case, the workplace became a place where one misstep meant instant death, leaving families devastated and colleagues traumatized. Industrial work is inherently dangerous, but these accidents highlight how quickly routine tasks can turn deadly. From spinning cables to molten iron vats, the risks are unforgiving. Safety is not optional, it's survival. And when measures fail, the results are catastrophic, leaving behind grief, shock, and the haunting knowledge that, in these workplaces, one moment of carelessness or a missing guard can end a life in an instant. Deep in the rugged hills of northern Myanmar lies Hapakant, a land famous for jade so valuable it fuels an entire shadow economy, and for tragedies so devastating they could silence a crowd. On July 2, 2020, this remote mining hub became the site of one of the deadliest mine disasters in history, the Hapakant jade mine landslide. It began like any other monsoon morning, with gray skies, thick fog, and miners scrambling over piles of discarded earth in search of leftover jade stones, the kind that could change a person's life overnight. But by noon, that dream quite literally crumbled. A massive slope of mining waste, soaked with rain and weakened by years of neglect, suddenly collapsed, unleashing a torrent of mud, rocks, and debris that swept through the valley with terrifying force. Within seconds, hundreds of miners were buried alive, their shouts drowned by the roar of the earth itself. The numbers were horrifying. Around 175 to 200 miners lost their lives that day, swallowed by the same land that had once promised them fortune. The victims were mostly freelance jade pickers, people who weren't employed by the big companies but scoured through the leftovers, hoping to find a gem or two. They stood on mountains of unstable waste rock, knowing the risks, but driven by the need to survive. When the hill collapsed, it sent a wave of sludge crashing down into a flooded pit, creating a deadly whirlpool of water and mud. Those close enough to see it described it as a wall of earth moving like the sea, and within minutes the pit became a mass grave. Rescue teams rushed in, but all they could find were helmets, sandals, and flashes of the green stones that had caused so much suffering. The tragedy did not come out of nowhere. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The jade mining industry in Hapakant is worth billions, but most of its profits never reach the miners themselves. Instead, the area is a chaotic patchwork of unregulated sites, enormous waste heaps, and dangerous working conditions. Companies dig deep, dump the leftover rubble into massive piles, and move on, leaving locals to pick through the remains. Add in the heavy monsoon rains, poor safety measures, and lack of government oversight, and you have a recipe for catastrophe. In fact, landslides in Hapakant are so common that locals have a grim saying, "When it rains, the mountains eat men." Sadly, the 2020 landslide proved just how literal that could be. After the disaster, rescue workers pulled out more than 160 bodies, while dozens more remained missing. The Myanmar Fire Service Department posted grim updates on Facebook as photos of the muddy devastation spread across the internet. Families gathered at the site, waiting for news that never came. Officials called it one of the worst mining accidents the country had ever seen. But for the people of Hapakant, it was another reminder that their lives were considered expendable in the pursuit of jade, a stone prized in luxury markets across the world. The Hapakant disaster was not just about nature's fury. It was about human greed and neglect. Experts later found that the slope had been dangerously unstable long before it collapsed, weakened by reckless dumping and rainwater infiltration. Locals had even warned authorities about the risk, but little was done. The government promised tighter regulations afterward, But with the jade trade being so lucrative and politically entangled, real change has been slow. In the end, the Hupakant landslide became a haunting symbol of Myanmar's jade industry, a world where fortune and fatality coexist side by side. Beneath the gleam of every polished green gemstone lies a story of struggle, sacrifice, and sometimes tragedy. Those who died in the 2020 disaster were not just victims of a landslide, they were victims of a system that buried them long before the Earth did. Ross Milne's story is one of those haunting Olympic tales that mixes youthful ambition with heartbreaking tragedy. In 1964, the Winter Olympics in Innsbruck, Austria, were buzzing with excitement, snow, and international pride. Among the many athletes was 19-year-old Ross Milne, an Australian alpine skier filled with energy, determination, and a dream of conquering the snowy slopes against the best in the world. Australia was not exactly known for its snow-covered mountains or its skiing prowess, so Ross's journey to the Olympics already made him a national hero back home. What was meant to be a proud debut on the global stage turned into one of the darkest moments in the game's history. During a downhill training run, Ross lost control on one of the steepest and fastest parts of the course. Downhill skiing is no small feat. It is a high-speed ballet of bravery and balance, where racers reach terrifying speeds on narrow, icy paths lined with trees, rocks, and fences. As Ross came barreling down, reports say he collided with a tree after losing control, suffering fatal injuries. He died before he ever got the chance to officially compete. The news stunned the Olympic community. 19 years old, full of hope, and representing a country that was still finding its footing in winter sports, his loss hit hard. In the days that followed, questions started flying faster than any skier on that course. Many wondered if the downhill track was too dangerous, and if the organizers had allowed too many skiers on the slope at once. Some accounts mentioned that the slope was crowded during training, with multiple competitors going down simultaneously, which could have easily distracted or startled even the most experienced racer. Others pointed out that conditions on the course were icy and fast, possibly too much for a young skier still adjusting to European snow and pace. Whatever the exact cause, one thing was clear: something had gone wrong. Ross's death sparked a wave of soul-searching among Olympic officials. Safety in downhill skiing was not taken as seriously then as it is today. Helmets were not standard, fencing was minimal, and medical response times were slower. Many felt his accident was a tragic warning that the Olympic rush for glory sometimes overlooked the very real risks athletes faced. In fact, his death, along with that of a British luger named Kazimierz Skrzypecki, who also died during training at the same games, forced the International Olympic Committee to reevaluate safety standards. It was a turning point in how training sessions were organized and how dangerous courses were handled in future competitions. Back home in Australia, the news devastated the sports community. Ross was not just an athlete. He was a symbol of courage, a young man from a sunburnt country who dared to chase winter dreams on the world's toughest stage. His teammate, Peter Brockhoff, was so shaken by the accident that he pulled out of the same event, saying he could not bring himself to race down that slope. The entire Australian team mourned deeply, yet they also carried Ross's spirit with them. His passing was not in vain. It paved the way for a greater emphasis on safety and respect for the limits of human endurance in the pursuit of Olympic glory. Today, Ross Milne's name does not often appear in highlight reels or Olympic montages, but among those who know their sport's history, he is remembered as a young man who gave everything for his dream. His story stands as both a tribute and a warning, a reminder that behind every thrilling Olympic moment lies an undercurrent of risk, courage, and sacrifice. The Innsbruck Games went on, as they always do, but Ross Milne's absence lingered like a chill on the mountain air. His tragic fall reshaped the spirit of alpine skiing and ensured that future generations could chase their dreams a little safer than he did. This incident remains a solemn memory in Olympic history. The Russian lathe accident remains one of the most chilling examples of just how dangerous industrial machinery can be. Lathes are critical in countless industries, from automotive manufacturing to furniture production, shaping metal, wood, and plastic with incredible precision. But that precision comes with a hidden cost, immense power paired with immense risk. One small mistake, one loose article of clothing, and an ordinary workday can instantly turn fatal. In the incident that shocked the industrial world, a worker approached a massive horizontal lathe, initially inspecting it with curiosity. Something seemed off, though at first he focused on the wrong detail. When his gaze shifted upward to the ceiling, he noticed a small leak dripping onto the machine. For a brief moment, relief washed over him. He thought he had figured out the problem. Stepping back to retrieve tools, he never imagined what was about to happen. In a split second, disaster struck. His sleeve became caught on the spinning cylinder. Before he could react, he was yanked into the lathe, slammed violently between the rotating steel and the machine's base, flung around like a rag doll. The lathe's relentless rotation tore through his body with horrifying speed. First, his shoes were flung off, then flesh, then limbs, until nothing recognizable remained. Moments later, a second worker arrived on the scene. He froze, utterly horrified at the devastation. Blood trails, shredded remains, and chaos everywhere. There was no time for rescue, no hope of survival. The factory cameras had captured the entire event, and footage circulated online before being quickly removed, shocking millions. Safety experts immediately highlighted the critical lessons. Never wear loose clothing near industrial machinery. Always secure hair and jewelry, and maintain a safe distance. Even beyond this tragedy, lathes carry numerous hazards. Flying debris, incorrect tool use, and improper machine settings can all cause severe injuries or death. Accidents like the Russian lathe incident underscore a larger systemic problem. Industries often underestimate the importance of proper worker training and adherence to safety protocols. Lathes are sometimes called the mother of all machines, and for good reason. Their power and versatility are unmatched, but that same power demands respect, understanding the machine, recognizing potential hazards, and using protective gear aren't optional. They're matters of survival. The aftermath of the Russian lathe accident was devastating both personally and industrially. Families and colleagues were left grappling with the sudden loss, while the incident sparked conversations across workplaces worldwide about heavy machinery safety. It became painfully clear. A single lapse, a loose sleeve, a brief distraction could have catastrophic consequences. In response, industries have taken steps to prevent similar tragedies. Comprehensive training programs now emphasize familiarity with machine operations, potential hazards, and proper safety procedures. Protective clothing designed to reduce the risk of entanglement has become standard, along with regular inspections and maintenance of equipment. Many workplaces have incorporated emergency shutoff mechanisms and automatic stop systems to minimize risk. This tragedy, and countless others like it, serves as a stark warning. Heavy machinery is not just powerful, it is unforgiving. One misstep, one ignored safety rule, and a life can be lost in seconds. The Russian lathe accident reminds workers and employers alike that safety must always come first. It's a lesson written in tragedy. Respect the machine, understand the risks, and never cut corners, because in environments like these, there is no room for error, and the consequences are absolute. The Courrières mine disaster of 1906 stands as one of the darkest chapters in Europe's industrial history, a grim reminder of how progress often came at the expense of human lives. On the morning of March 10, 1906, in northern France's Courrières coalfield, over 1,700 miners descended into the depths of the earth, unaware that only about half of them would ever see daylight again. Moments later, a massive explosion, likely caused by coal dust igniting after a minor underground fire, ripped through the mine's tunnels. The blast was so violent it shattered equipment, collapsed galleries, and sent a wave of suffocating gas and debris racing through the shafts like a deadly storm. The explosion instantly killed hundreds, but the true horror unfolded in the hours that followed. The air underground became a toxic mix of smoke and gas, and survivors stumbled blindly through the darkness, gasping for air as they searched for an escape that no longer existed. Above ground, chaos reigned. Families rushed to the mine's entrance, desperate for news of loved ones. The blackened faces of rescuers emerging from the tunnels told them all they needed to know. It was a scene of heartbreak and disbelief, one that would haunt the mining communities of northern France for generations. The death toll reached an estimated 1,099 miners, making it Europe's worst mining disaster. Among the victims were children as young as 10, who had been working alongside their fathers in the dangerous, cramped tunnels. The scale of the tragedy shocked not just France, but the entire continent. In an era when industrial safety was often treated as an afterthought, the Corriere disaster exposed the brutal reality of the working class, the people whose sweat and lives fueled Europe's growing industries. Rescue operations began, but they were painfully slow. The mine company hesitated, fearing further explosions, and delayed sending rescue teams for days. This hesitation sparked outrage. As officials argued, volunteers and fellow miners took matters into their own hands, venturing into the deadly maze to pull out whoever might still be alive. Incredibly, 13 miners were found alive 20 days later, having survived in near darkness by eating horse meat and drinking filthy water. Their survival was hailed as miraculous, but it only highlighted the disastrous mismanagement of the initial rescue efforts. The aftermath was turbulent. Strikes erupted across France, fueled by anger at the government and mine owners who seemed more concerned about profits than human lives. The disaster became a powerful symbol of industrial neglect and a rallying cry for workers' rights. It forced authorities to confront the urgent need for stricter safety regulations, better ventilation systems, and humane working conditions underground. Today, more than a century later, the Corriere's mine disaster remains a solemn reminder of the human cost of progress. The site stands as both a memorial and a warning, a tribute to the miners who perished, and a testament to the resilience of those who demanded change in the face of unimaginable loss. Beneath the quiet fields of northern France lie the echoes of that terrible morning in 1906, when the earth itself seemed to swallow a community whole, and the world learned a painful lesson about the price of industrial ambition. The Munich massacre of 1972 is remembered as one of the darkest moments in Olympic history, a stark reminder that even global celebrations of sport can be shattered by violence and political conflict. The 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, West Germany, were intended to symbolize peace, friendship, and international cooperation, showcasing a modern, open Germany far removed from the shadow of the 1936 Berlin Games. Athletes from around the world mingled freely in the Olympic Village, unaware that a meticulously planned attack was about to unfold. In the early hours of September 5th, members of the Palestinian terrorist group Black September infiltrated the village, targeting the Israeli Olympic team. 11 athletes and coaches were taken hostage, their lives suddenly hanging by a thread. The terrorists demanded the release of more than 200 Palestinian prisoners held in Israel, escalating the situation into a tense international crisis. News of the attack spread rapidly, transforming what had begun as a celebration of athletic achievement into a nightmare watched by millions around the world. German authorities attempted to negotiate, but confusion and missteps marked the early response, creating a tense standoff that left the hostages in extreme danger. The situation reached a tragic climax at the Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base, where German officials had organized what they believed would be a rescue operation. Unfortunately, the plan failed catastrophically. The terrorists, anticipating the assault, opened fire, resulting in the deaths of all 11 Israeli hostages along with a German police officer. 5 of the 8 terrorists were also killed in the shootout. The massacre sent shockwaves through the international community, leaving a deep scar on both Israel and the Olympic movement itself. It underscored the reality that sport and politics cannot be fully separated, and that even events designed to promote unity and peace are vulnerable to acts of extremism. In the aftermath, the massacre prompted a complete overhaul of Olympic security measures, with organizers recognizing that rigorous protection for athletes and spectators was essential. Memorials were later established to honor the lives lost, ensuring that the tragedy would not be forgotten and that the lessons learned would inform future generations. The event also accelerated international counterterrorism efforts, highlighting the global implications of political violence. Beyond the statistics and headlines, the human stories of the Munich massacre are what endure most profoundly. The 11 athletes and coaches who lost their lives had aspirations, talents, and dreams abruptly cut short, and their memory remains a powerful testament to courage and resilience. Survivors like Shaul Ladany, an Olympic racewalker who endured both the Holocaust and the Munich attack, serve as living reminders of human endurance in the face of unimaginable horrors. The massacre remains a somber chapter in Olympic history, contrasting sharply with the ideals of unity, friendship, and international cooperation that the Games were meant to embody. Today, as the Olympics continue to bring nations together, the events of September 5, 1972, serve as a solemn reminder of the fragility of life, the human cost of political extremism, and the responsibility to protect those who gather to celebrate the best of human achievement. The Munich massacre, though deeply tragic, ensures that history never forgets the 11 lives lost and the lessons learned from the darkest day in Olympic history.